Music can be very demanding. It can challenge us to engage with things that we find intellectually or physically difficult, things that seem scary and make us vulnerable, or things that are just plain tedious but might be necessary to make progress. Music can ask us to be more technically skilled or more clever, but it can also tell us we need to become more self-aware and emotionally intelligent to do what we want to do with it. Looking back in the last 3 or 6 or 12 months, trying to spot patterns that might be holding us back and figuring out what to do about them helps us meet those challenges and thrive as music makers. And because it can be such a struggle sometimes, it's also really important to look back and celebrate our victories, even the little ones. I usually ask my students to do this kind of thinking at least once a season or so, and at the end of the calendar year, we'll do a bigger wrap-up trying to figure out our key takeaways and look at our musical lives from more of a bird's eye view. This year, I thought it would be helpful to share my own answers to the questions. I also thought it would be fun to ask friends and colleagues about this stuff, so you'll see them and some of my older students offering their thoughts and sharing their stories throughout this video. I think it could be really helpful to see what this kind of reflection looks like for different people at different stages of our musical development. We're going to talk about breakthroughs, setbacks, plateaus, and what keeps us moving forward. That's a lot to cover, so let's jump right in.
I mean, the first thing that I'm thinking of is just like, because you've said it so much, is like taking advantage of mistakes and like using them as opportunities rather than like a mistake.
The first thing I like to ask about is any breakthroughs or victories that we've had. These can be concrete external goals like playing performances, finishing or publishing music, but they can also be things we learned or discovered that are sources of excitement or pride or maybe even a certain amount of relief. I'll try to give an example of that in a minute with my own music, but first I want to talk about teaching. For me, one of the highlights this year was actually the progress of some of my recent graduates. Two of my students left high school and my studio this year. Isabel is at UC Berkeley and has been emailing me all fall to ask me random questions about music or talk about projects she's working on in her music history class or send me stuff to listen to. She plays in percussion ensembles and takes every opportunity she can to get into piano practice rooms and play around with ideas. Jaden is taking a gap year in LA to practice, complete some production projects, and work an internship I set up for him with a producer and songwriter that I know there.
Whenever I'm like making something new and I'm wondering like, is this garbage? What I just do is I like to go back and listen to like the older stuff that I did because I know for a fact that that's garbage. So if it compares favorably to that, then like, regardless of whether I end up liking it in the future or not, I consider that a good job. So recently, like the stuff that I've been making, I've been happy with.
My upcoming album, which I'm hoping to release maybe around spring break time period era. All of the songs, all 14 songs on it were written this year, and those 14 songs are part of maybe like 30 songs that I've fully written out this year, which is, I barely maybe hit that mark in 2 years previously, around when I was making my other 2 albums. So like songwriting wise, I'm pretty proud of how I've just kind of been able to go at it. The Japanese Student Association Club at Cal Poly, which I am now a board member of, we have a Japanese rock band that we don't do just J-rock and stuff. We usually do pop and like American pop if we can, but with a sprinkle a few Japanese songs in there. So Culture Fest likes us. But we left off spring quarter with 7 members, including myself. Solid sized band. It was like all the normal rock instrumentation plus a saxophonist. It was going well. We felt good. And then the lead graduated, which left me in charge. And it works out nicely because I have my whole garage where I keep all my instruments and stuff, so I can host practices, and I clean that up. And I've been leading, I've been leading the band, which I'm pretty proud of. But I think what's bigger is that I get to boast that this band is completely like audition free in every way, shape, or form. It's just like the way I advertise it is if you even have like the slightest interest in music, you don't even have to want to play. You could like see what the heck is going on. You can just come be our audience at the very least if you really want. But I'm always willing. I also advertise that I'm willing to teach people certain instruments so that they can join and play, and it's just a fun time because we do house parties and stuff like that too. And member wise, again, we ended off with 7 members last spring quarter, at the end of spring quarter, and now we're at solid at the very least like 18, I think. it's a lot of people. At some point we hit this threshold where I made the executive decision, of course while discussing with bandmates, but I decided to split up the band into 2 bands, one that does rock and pop and the such, and one that does jazz. Because as it turns out, we ended up having, like, I looked over the instrumentation, like what everyone could play. We have like 2 trombonists, an alto, a tenor, a trumpet. It's vocalist. We have someone who can do jazz guitar. I can do jazz piano. We have a decent drummer. So it's like, and bassist, of course. So we, and like all of that, like we have a whole other set of people who play all those instruments too for the rock band. So it kind of worked out pretty nicely for that. So I'd say that's an accomplishment I'm proud of. Just like being able to handle it thus far. Our performances so far have been pretty cool.
I'm happy for all of these people, but I'm also secretly happy about them and proud of them. The thing that I hope for the most with all my students is that they'll become artists. It's not something I can force, but I try to prepare them for it and encourage it as much as possible. Being an artist and being a musician are not the same thing. Being an artist is not about what you do for a living. It's not even about the quality of the music you make or the amount you produce in a given year, although that tends to be really important to people who think of themselves as artists. More than anything, it's an attitude toward life and toward music that I think can be very helpful and important for sensitive people to cultivate. For me, the best possible outcome once I hand over the reins is to see students continuing to be curious about music, studying it, and being engaged in creative processes, especially if they're not planning for a career in the music industry. Creating music and creating culture is a process that benefits from the participation of everyone with ears and ideas, not just the people who can figure out how to make a living doing it. So seeing these 3 finding a way forward with their music this year, carrying it into the next stage of their lives with or without any intention of trying to build a career, was a major ray of light for me.
Something even better. We're gonna combine those. So what she's thinking, what you're thinking. So I know what you're thinking. Yeah. Because it's the one way that I went. I know what you're thinking because it's the way that it could be going. So we're gonna combine that, and it's gonna be like boop 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 jump, pa. Oh, how cool!
I put them all on the spot and made them sing songs, like get up with the band and sing songs. And so they had to go up and like figure out a song to sing with the band. And they were all like so nervous and freaking out about it. And, most of them were like just falling on their faces in great ways. They loved it though. It was such a great vibe. Everyone was laughing and having fun. And I was like, guys, you're laughing and having fun and smiling. Why don't we do this like whenever we play? Why is it only when we're like falling on our faces trying to sing songs and embarrassing ourselves in front of everyone that now we're having fun? Like, what happened?
Now let's talk about music. So at the start of this year, I was feeling pretty overwhelmed as a songwriter. I released 1 EP last year, but I wasn't really satisfied with anything that I had written or recorded since then. And I realized I was really looking to take the songs that I was writing in a different direction. So I was figuring out how to balance doing that, which takes a fair amount of time, with doing the things that I wanted to do to grow as a teacher, and with being newly married. So the first thing I had to figure out is what change I was looking for. What direction was I trying to take my music in?
I guess towards the end of the year, I decided I kind of wanted to just make some instrumental music for the first time in a long time. And so I just started making synth music. I kind of needed that as an outlet just for myself, basically, just because I was kind of experiencing some writer's block, not really writing anything. Not really feeling inspired to pick up the guitar and write songs. I don't know. I just kept thinking I'd really love to try to do something else with music, because it can be so many other things than what I've been trying to do. So yeah, just making instrumental music was probably maybe the only real breakthrough that I had in the year. Yeah, it's just something I can feel more sustainable about, being able to do consistently, than I can about vocal music. It kind of makes me feel healthier or something to just be creating stuff.
The past couple years, I've noticed myself sort of slipping into this compositional rut with songwriting, where I'm resorting to the same tricks over and over just to move a song toward a state that feels more finished. And then I have to dip into another bag of tricks when I start recording to cover for the deficiencies that come up because of the compositional choices. And so I end up repeating those tricks too, and the result seems to be music that feels, for me, overproduced and undercomposed. There's lots of lush textures, there's lots of interesting sounds, but there's not really enough substance for my taste. So I wanted to find a new way of approaching songwriting that was prioritizing melody and structure to support the lyrics that I was writing, rather than trying to make texture and production do all the heavy lifting. And the conventional wisdom about this is, just write a ton of stuff all the time and some of it will be good. And this is the first thing I have most students do when we're working on anything creative. But I've spent whole years just aiming for a certain volume of ideas, and while it helped me make a lot of progress as a writer, it wasn't really getting me what I was looking for this year. I just felt very stuck. And my suspicion was that by trying to move pretty quickly with the music all the time, that in service of starting and finishing a lot of things, I was missing something important. Depriving myself of the opportunity to think hard about the different ways that a song could sound and try different things out. So my solution was to take a break from writing anything new this year and just rework a handful of songs that I considered at one point to be done or nearly done, that I felt had a lot of potential still that hadn't been unlocked, and see if I could unearth something in them that I hadn't heard or seen yet. I really wanted to find arrangements that felt fresh and unique, and to do that with just a guitar and one voice, so that any future production is just adding fine details or enhancing the mood, not trying to make up for a structural weakness in the music or an underdeveloped performance. I told myself it's okay if you only finish 3 songs this entire year, and you're probably never going to work on more than 5. As long as you can say for any given song that you tried everything that you could within the creative restrictions that you set for yourself, you did your job. It was a success. So it wasn't even about whether it sounded good to me at the end of the process. The goal was just to be convinced that I'd found the best option given my constraints. So I sent a folder full of sketches to my friend Jacob Matthias, who is one of my favorite guitarists alive. We picked 5 or 6 candidates to work on, and we sat down and started searching for guitar parts that felt fresh and engaging. And we found them, and it turned out that they were really, really hard for me to play. So my focus narrowed to 3 songs, and I spent basically all my songwriting time in any given week from March or April onward, working on these songs, learning parts Jacob wrote, writing other parts based off of things he'd pointed out to me from my own sketches and suggested that I had develop, tinkering with every part either of us had written endlessly, trying and scrutinizing every single variation I could think of, rewriting vocal melodies, rewriting lyrics, adding or dropping or rearranging sections, everything that I could do with just the voice and the guitar, short of tearing it up and writing a new song. And in the past, doing stuff like this would have made me tear my hair out, but because I knew I had plenty of time and didn't really feel like I was supposed to be writing a certain volume of new stuff, I was able to just enjoy the process of tinkering. And the result is 3 songs that sound and feel very different from anything I've written up to this point, and which have forced me to grow a lot as a singer and a guitarist. I managed to record one of them over the summer, and I'm aiming to record the other 2 before the end of the year. And hopefully when they see the light of day, you can't hear how hard they were to work out, because to me that would mean that they sound overwrought, but that is what it is. It wasn't one of my main concerns. It was just about searching for something different.
I think one of the biggest ones was this EP that I'm finishing mixing right now. Was approached very differently than I've ever approached a collection of songs. And it's because I didn't even think it was going to happen. I was just at the beginning of this year in January on that website songadayforamonth.com, and I was just trying to write a song a day, and these like kind of unfinished short songs came out of it. I showed them to my boyfriend and he was like, "Oh, these are great. Like, I'd like to jump from what you're currently working on and make this an album." And I was just like, sure. Like, but I hadn't thought of the concept. Usually when I'm like thinking of a collection of songs, I like know the order I want everything to be in. I have an idea for the album art and the videos. It's like all one big story. And this time that wasn't the case because I didn't even know I wanted these songs to be released. So when we started working on it, I did start crafting some kind of like story of how they all fit together, but not really as much. I sort of just like let go a little bit and tried to focus more on like getting the songs to sound good and performing them with feeling, because they were so new that I could really sink my teeth into just like, oh wow, like I'm not used to performing these. I don't play these live. I don't have a lot of experience with them. And now that they're done, I'm listening to it and I'm like, wow, this really came out like a surprise. And it just sort of along the way sounded different than I would have thought it would. And now I'm like more curious about having that kind of workflow in the future, planning less and just not overthinking like what the project is, but just doing it and letting it surprise you along the way has been a nice change of pace for me.
So it was very liberating for me to stop aiming for like 20 finished songs and 2 or 3 good ones among them, and instead pour all my energy into a couple pieces of music, with the goal being to feel really sure that I had found my limit, at least as far as solo performance goes. It was a relief to know that I just had to arrive at something with these 3 pieces by the end of the year, instead of feeling constantly pressured to make the next deadline and start something new, knowing that the main factor limiting the quality of the music was not my creativity or my musicianship, but how much time I had to devote to a given piece of music. It felt good to go deep into a few songs rather than passing over a couple dozen. And it was surprisingly hard to let myself do that.
This year I put out my first EP, which was a big milestone in so many different ways, because I had to learn how to do that and all the things that go into that and what it means to not just like write songs and like make music, but like what it is to like be an artist and have a vision for like a larger body of work. And yeah, there's so many layers to that. I think I was making music from a place of like, I like music. I'm gonna write a song. Cool, that's cool. I like it. It makes me, I think it's cool. But now it's when I'm writing music for myself, it's a lot more focused on what is the entirety of my vision that I'm trying to showcase with this music, which makes making music feel a lot more intentional and a lot more serious to me in a way that I appreciate and can see myself making music that way for a long time.
The very last track on the record, I've been producing myself, and this time last year, I was really pushing it very hard. It wasn't The End of Summer, which I showed you this time, around last year. There's another song that I worked really hard on for like a month, and it just didn't work at all, and it was like a spectacular disaster. So I gave it a break, came back to it this fall, and this time around, I think it's one of the best things I've ever done. And I think my demo mix is the mix that I'm going to keep. I can hear the differences between my mix and the other mixes. There's a lot about compression and like nice compressors that I don't really know that much about, and a lot about like side chaining drums and stuff that I don't know as much about as I would like, but it's cleared the threshold of good enough. And I wish that by this point I was just like a master at everything, because I'm 28 and I would like to just be a master at everything by now, and I'm not, but that's real progress. For a long time, it was just not good enough, even for like a first release for me. And that means that I don't have like a string of records that I made in my early 20s, like Dave Longstreth or like Phil Elverum or whatever. But at that time, I was learning to write like art music, and I was learning to play jazz and do these other things that are like, they're not as cutesy, and I've realized I'm not really down with the sort of cutesy aesthetic for any of my music. Like, that's just not who I am. So there was a lot along the way, and I had to learn about what my project is as a songwriter, and now I know more about it. And I wouldn't say that I'm madly in love with the record, but I listened through everything that I have last night, which is almost, I have to record like one 1-minute song and finish a couple of vocals on another song, and it's like almost an hour long. No, it's more, it's almost 80 minutes long. It's almost a full CD. And I was just like, okay, like there are a lot of moments where I'm like, wow, that was a bold decision that I made a year ago, and like maybe I wouldn't make the same decision now. But I'm like, okay, this is like a crazy enough thing. It's ambitious, it's weird. I don't know if it's all successful, but it's enough that I can say that this is the beginning.
The prevailing wisdom among creative people is that more is better, and that the path to your best work is to make as much stuff as possible as fast as you can. If you write 100 songs, at least one of them will be good, even if it's by accident. And as long as you keep doing it and your craft is improving, sometimes that hit rate will increase and you'll get one good song in every 50 or every 20, but more reliably, your churn rate is what goes up. The more songs you write, the more the process becomes automatic. The more automatic the process becomes, the faster you can churn out songs. The faster you can churn out songs, the sooner you will stumble on a good one. I have nothing against that approach to creative work. It's super useful. I've done it before. I will do it again. I recommend students to do it all the time. Prioritizing prolificacy above most other things builds up your confidence because you're focused on the process. You just go through the steps and finish the work and start the next one. Don't worry about writing anything good, just write a lot. And what happens when you do that usually is that good ideas just sort of show up on their own, almost without you having to try. The first year that I was serious about writing songs, I wrote dozens of them. I wrote a song every morning for a whole summer. I started the pandemic off by writing and recording a new piece of music every day for a week. Those kinds of sprints are really great for waking up your basic creative instinct or revitalizing it if it needs to be, or for laying the groundwork for a new project, or just for fun. And it's fun to say, screw it, and write a song in an hour and find out that all that was holding you back was your fear that it would sound bad, and that it's okay if it does, because if you wrote a song in an hour today, you can write a song in an hour tomorrow, and if you do that enough times, you'll write a good one by accident, and you find out that that's a way that you can work. But we're not robots. We're not like song machines. And when you find yourself slavishly adhering to some kind of output goal, always, no matter what, unless the threshold is very low, like something you could do in 10 minutes a day, I think it's more likely to discourage you or burn you out than it is to make you a great artist. And I suspected that pursuing high output was keeping me from learning certain things about writing songs, especially about guitar parts. So at the end of the day, we're each teaching ourselves how to do this. And other people can give us advice and show us things, offer their support. The support part is always super valuable. The advice varies in how valuable it is. Some pieces of advice and some approaches are helpful, and some need to be modified to work out for our particular process or goals, and some are just bad or irrelevant for us. We can only figure out which ones are which for us at any given time by experimenting and paying attention to what happens. The prevailing wisdom isn't always the best way for you, it's just the way that works for most of us most of the time. And sometimes you have to break with that to learn something. The tricky part about doing this is the social pressure, even among artists, to conform to the norms of our discipline, and there are norms. Right now, slowing down sets you against the grain. Every time I checked social media or caught up with a friend, I saw them cranking out material, doing writing retreats, doing month-long challenges, releasing a single every month or every 6 weeks. All the sorts of really exciting and exhausting things that we do when you're trying to make a career in music or grow as an artist. I doubted sometimes whether I was doing the right thing for myself. I felt inadequate. I was jealous of the attention that they got and worried that the songs that I was writing would just amount to nothing. But every little breakthrough on one of my chosen few was so gratifying. And the process of writing with Jacob was so fun and exciting. And the feedback that I got from close friends who know my music well as I was showing them sketch recordings or demos was so encouraging that I was able to say, screw it. I could speed up again next year if I want to. I've done it before. I can do it again. And stay the course, diving as deep as I could into about 10 minutes of music. Some of these songs feel to me like they're like 8 minutes long because of how much is going on for me while I'm playing them, but I'll look at the recording and they're like 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And a couple months ago, I played one of them for a friend who's a brilliant guitarist who knew me mainly as a jazz musician, and I suspect never took me that seriously as a singer or songwriter. But when I finished and looked at him at the end, he was like, tears in his eyes, let out this huge sigh, like, oh my God, man, and started talking to me right away about, how I need to record that, put that in the world immediately, all this stuff that I'd never heard from him before in reaction to a song that I'd written. And if I had doubted that taking my time was worth it this year, then that was confirmation for me that it was. Taking a full year to finish 3 songs, poring over and touching every microsecond of the music was, for me, kind of a healing indulgence that yielded a lot of artistic growth in terms of how I play the guitar, what I'm listening for in music, and how I think about songwriting going forward. I definitely plan on moving back towards writing a lot more and finishing things faster in 2023, but I have some ideas now for adjustments to that process that I'm really excited to try, and I'm not convinced that I would have come up with any of them if I hadn't given myself a pseudo vacation from the constant grind of starting and finishing new work and just focused that energy in a very different way. Making music can be hard work, but it doesn't have to feel like a grind all the time. And I think that we have to experiment and figure out what's sustainable and satisfying for each of us. And that's not going to be the same for every season of your life. So I'm quite happy to say that this year I only finished 3 songs.
I think I've been wanting to learn how to play piano since I was little, and something that I just never got around to it. And I thought I was too old for it because I don't have any background in music. I didn't know how to read music prior to taking the class, and don't have an ear for it. I don't know, I just never really was involved in music too much growing up, and so I thought I was too old for it. And just jumping in and scheduling courses was kind of like a big step for me, so I'm proud of that. Learning how to read music, I never thought I was going to be able to figure that out. Being able to just play a full song, even though it's a little choppy right now, I can still read it and play it. So
I played my first gig since before COVID in person this year. So that was that was a big one to just get. And I was never, you know, gigging every week or even potentially every month at the regular rate of things, but like just doing it for an audience again in person was felt very important, felt right. And you know, it was like a nice big night of experimental music here in San Juan, which doesn't really happen every week. So, you know, it was a good crowd, felt good. And then on top of that, just kind of like rediscovered my love of DJing, which has always been like a more of a utility, pragmatic skill that I developed in New York to like work, and started doing more of it for fun this year. So I was always be able to teach it to people, but never was like clubbing. And I still don't club. I'm an 80-year-old, 31-year-old, you know, I go to bed early. But I spun a Halloween rave, which was great, which I had never done. I had never done in person for an audience, see DJs like in the booth, like done a few radio shows occasionally, but had never done like a rave proper. And again, being the old man, playing, I was like, it's 10 p.m. Why aren't people dancing? And it's like, well, it's a rave. Like it's 10 p.m. Like anytime before midnight is brunch, you know. Like that was the vibe, was that people like, whereas it wasn't even like, I don't have permission to dance until after midnight. Something felt like the vibe, but didn't ruin it for me. I had a good time.
The tour was really big for me, I think, because it made me feel like I'm not like literally only making music for myself, which I still think that's the ideal. You should not care about that. I think that the ideal is it should make no difference to you at all if you're making music and only you listen to it versus if you make music like, you know, have like a million monthly listeners. But because of my weakness, I do still appreciate like people checking it out. Yeah, because it was all this DIY stuff, like we didn't book any big cities, which is funny because mathematically, like if I go on Spotify and look at where my listenership is, like it's in bigger cities. There's more people there, and so it's like if we had done London, like we actually probably would have had like more fans. But we didn't do London, we didn't do Berlin. We were doing like all like Leipzig and like all these small cities in the UK. So it was like the first night we played in Birmingham, which actually probably was the biggest city we played, but not like Chris didn't know anyone there. I didn't have any fans there. And then our local opener dropped out the night before. So literally we showed up and there were 5 people there to see us. And I think they were literally there like because there was a pub downstairs and they were like somehow wandered upstairs. But one of them bought a record from me, and it was one of 3 people who bought a record from me the entire tour. So it was like that was kind of a cool feeling actually. So that was cool. But overall, like I mean, doing that tour was really like I really enjoyed doing it, and then also I think it made me feel a little bit like okay, I'm kind of like doing this music thing for real, which was like I kind of needed that. I think
I'm going to be teaching at school here in Toronto, Humber College, in the new year. So very much looking forward to that. When I moved back from Berkeley, I taught beginner guitar like 4 days a week, and there's people that love doing that, but I'm not one of those people, I don't think. So I want to be with people that want to challenge themselves and work on advanced stuff. Music specific breakthroughs, honestly, that happens every day. I try and make that happen every day. That's just the beauty of music to me. It's so, you know, you can just learn a new song and there's a breakthrough right there. Learn 8 bars of any transcription, you're going to learn something about music from that.
Creating the record was just like one of the best times of my life. Like we're just like we all live together, everyone in my group. So we just, you know, like go in my room, come up with ideas. Like we have a group chat, like someone will like just sing a hook they came up with or something into the phone and then throw it in the group chat. We're like, oh my God, like I'm gonna make a beat right now. And I go do that and we just try to make things work, and it's like all fun, you know. And it wasn't even like we're going to make a record. It was kind of just like oh, we have all these songs we've been creating. Let's just choose some and put them out. And as soon as I get really excited about like concept and like art direction. My girlfriend's a graphic designer and she did all the artwork. She made all of the merch with her team and stuff. So we were bringing a bunch of people in and we have a show, like a release show. And this was like the most tickets I've ever sold in my life. It was like 150 people came, I think, at like this cool venue called Los Globos that we did. And the funniest thing is like this is the most tickets I've ever sold, and I wasn't like playing drums. I was just jumping around on the stage.
I don't know. It's been pretty good project wise, like what we've been working on. So there hasn't been something that I felt like I should be better at this, or I could do this a lot better. It's just like I'm pretty happy with where I am at.
I like sort of have a multifaceted music career in the way that like I do a lot of performance in the modern jazz and sort of like funk and punk rock world with my band Thumbosaurus, but then I also release a lot of solo music. So like my solo music for me is always going to be like a very big personal breakthrough because it's just me putting out like my truest self and my hardest work that I can do. And I put out an EP this year called Laser Cars, which I'm really proud of. And like for me, that was one of my biggest breakthroughs and also one of my biggest frustrations because I think it was kind of outside of a box. Like I didn't realize that people thought about my music in like a certain way, but I think it kind of challenged like a lot of people's perceptions of me because the first song, I got a ton of feedback on it that like, oh, like you're really into like hyper pop now. Like I can't believe this. And I wasn't really trying to create something that sounded hyper pop, but that was something that sort of caused a setback for me that was like, oh, people are really putting me like in this box that I didn't realize even existed. Like I didn't realize people cared if I make something that doesn't read as jazz or like, you know, and I don't really mind, but that definitely like threw me for a little bit of a loop. And I think I sort of overcame that by realizing that like, you know, I just make what I make no matter what. And like, I'm not trying to make anything in particular, which is something I'm really proud of myself for doing. And, you know, I let myself be really weird and out. And like, I think that's just always going to be challenging for people no matter what. But, you know, a lot of my mentors who do really challenging work and are in their 60s, like seem to still struggle with this. So I think it's like the breakthrough is also the same as the setback.
Since I'm trying to like have a relatively consistent schedule, like a certain amount of time to just mess around in Ableton. But like when you're just doing that, and the time like that you give yourself just runs out and you feel like you haven't done anything, kind of sucks.
The biggest hurdle challenge was getting COVID this year because that was just dealing with health problems while trying to teach and do music. It was very rough.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I feel like I didn't practice as much as I would have hoped this past semester. Last semester, I kind of had a situation where I was teaching an early class and I had extra hours after that where I was at Berkeley anyways, so I was able to get on a piano. I've practiced at home, but I need to get to a real piano. It really is bad for your technique. Definitely want to rectify that New Year's resolution.
I'm seeing how I could get comfortable being, you know, a side man. There's a beauty in that, and I love that, being in other people's projects. They're your friends. They're booking gigs. You're a musician. You want to play gigs. You want to make money. Are you a musician or are you an artist? I think I'm a musician when I'm in the city, but in my room, I'm an artist, you know, and I want to change that.
Things are taking a long time. And even this EP that was songs that I thought were going to be really quick, it's now been it's been a year. It's been a year since I wrote them. And And it hasn't been 2 years, so it's better than the last time I attempted that. But we really thought we were just going to go into the studio and knock them out and like make some camcorder videos and put it out. And like now it's like it's a little bit bigger than that. But you know, that's I kind of like when projects embody an era, but that the downside of that is you are kind of in this like limbo for a long time of like, wait, I have so much that I can't wait to show you. But I also have to keep doing this because this is what I like to do. So I'm going to be doing it in private. But then this stuff, you'll see, you know, it's like
show happened, albums out, and then it's like, what now? And you get that like post release, post show depression kind of feeling. It wasn't like I couldn't do anything at all, but I just didn't get that same feeling for a while as we were like making the record. So I guess for that, yeah, it was kind of just like a very up down kind of thing.
I was just dealing with a lot of anxiety this year. It eventually boils down to like this feeling that there is like a right or wrong way to be doing things. Really worrying, like, am I doing the right thing? Like, is this the right way to spend my time? Like, should I be doing this instead? And then also just like making very little money and living in LA, which is a very expensive city. I think that's probably the biggest hurdle that I've been dealing with, is how to deal with the anxieties of everyday life and also of the very unstable life of a freelancer and an unstable life of an artist or, you know, musician.
I was aware that there were a lot of people who I thought were really doing cool stuff who didn't really have a reason to take me seriously because they just knew me as some composer or whatever, or somebody who makes scores, which is not something that's relevant at all to any sort of music scene in New York, besides the ones where people are in school. I wasn't representing myself as an improviser or as an experimental musician, and I had to figure out my relationship to the guitar. So basically, getting vibed a lot. And sometimes by people who just had every reason to vibe me, and then sometimes encountering very negative energy, like very negative, hostile energy that goes far beyond anything that makes sense relative to the musical situation. And, you know, I would get through it at the show, but then 4 or 5 days later it would hit and I'd be like, what am I doing? And self-doubt would set in really hard.
This year was not that productive for me in terms of like making a lot of music, which was really unfortunate, but it was a mixture of things. I had a lot of like outside of music stuff. I had to change jobs. Like actually I worked, so my old gig, I worked at Twitter before. So I wasn't there for this. Like I left before like he actually took over, but so the funny thing with the timing was like that happened in April. And my tour was started in the end of May, which meant that I had basically 2 months to get all the visuals and the live setup together and rehearse, which was actually like a ton of work. And I remember like the week before the tour, literally I couldn't sleep at night. I'd be in bed and I was just visualizing like one of the last gigs I played like in 2018, 2019. Like it was this horrible, like one of the worst gigs I played. It was at this like tent in this like shanty town venue in like Bushwick, and it was in the summer and my computer overheated and literally died like mid song, like completely. And fortunately or unfortunately no one was there. I literally made it through one track and then I had this horrible white noise blast of like sample breakdown and then my computers went black. And so I kept visualizing that this would happen, and like I like during the tour, and I was like, well, I how do I know that like that won't happen like in the UK? What if something happens with like the power being different or whatever? Like, and so I was super stressed about it. But if, you know, to interview and to get ready for interviews, that's like a month. I didn't have time. So basically I was like, okay, I am officially checked out of this situation from this point forward. I'm going to do this tour thing. And then the second the tour is over, literally, I remember I put all my synths on my desk and I didn't plug anything back in for a month because it was just dealing with interviews and all that. And I remember once I got an offer, I plugged stuff back in and I like picked it back up. So it was like it was just like time deleted from my life essentially. And like the way you can, here, I'll send you this. Like, so I organize like all my Ableton file, like stuff like by year. Like, so every year I make a new folder, and like, so this is like my 2021 folder, but then like this is my 20, it's like it's the shortest one on record is my 2022. Like you can literally see how much less productive it was. It's actually like it's actually a great like measure. Like every year I can like go and see like how how much I did, and or how little I did. That was definitely like the low light of the year. It's just I wish I'd put out more music.
I feel like just knowing like basic chords or how to make chords, because I've been trying to learn more of that, but it's just like really hard to do for me for some reason.
Okay, interesting.
Teacher burnout is probably my biggest gripe of the year, being that this was my first like year of just straight through private teaching. No other, I mean, some supplementary income from some writing stuff, but really just I am my own boss 100%. And that means like I earn what I, as you know, it's kind of have to put in to get out, you know? And so there was quite a rush up until the summer, I would say, of really trying not to have trying to keep it steady as far as the income goes, when universally the economy is going downwards. So, you know, this isn't just music teachers too. This is like, I hear podcasters talking about like the great unsubscribing, you know, like it really is happening. People just don't have the external, you know, superfluous funds for the little things they like, even if it's just $5 a month. And that just means more grinding to make up for it. And it burns out, you know, and it's not really a setback personal to me, but more I'm just a phenomenon that many of us are feeling, myself included. I guess we get used to the COVID levels of people wanting to do things remotely as teachers or whatever, you know, and when things start going back to normal, whether or not they should be 100%, you know, you feel that.
There have been so many times when I like just have been like, why do I even do this? Like, because like I don't know, just like trying to finish songs and make records can be like torture. Just like trying to finish stuff. I had like an EP that I wanted to finish this year. I definitely got into the over mixing phase, and then just like completely destroyed my interest in the music. I couldn't get it completely done.
2022 was a frustrating year for me in a number of ways. Part of my step back from writing was artistically motivated, but it was also about making space to concentrate on growing as a teacher. There were a couple pedagogy books that I really wanted to read, a theory textbook I was studying, and most importantly, I wanted to write about what I was learning and practicing and what my students were doing and publish as much as possible. And I did publish 25 pieces on my website, including some lessons and exercises that I really wanted to share for a while and work out in a distilled kind of condensed format. But it feels like I fell short of what I could have done. And given that I had stepped back from finishing music, I find myself wishing that I had published more as a teacher. Not a huge amount, like 5 or 10 more pieces would have done it, but didn't quite make it. Basically, I averaged one thing every 2 weeks, and I think I'd be much happier with one thing every 7 to 10 days. I don't know how realistic that is, but we're going to find out this year. On the music side, my tortoise speed writing process was kind of a double-edged sword. I think it was healthy for me to take that time to see what could be done by going very deep instead of very wide. But at this rate, if I live to be 80, I'll only finish 150 more songs, and I'm not convinced that that's the path to my best work. Okay, the third big problem I had this year was isolation. Throughout the first 2 years of the pandemic, I actually did a really good job of cultivating a small but close online community with my students and friends. But this year saw a sharp reduction in the number and quality of the things that I organized online. Having talked to other music teachers and people who run schools this year, it makes sense to me. This was the first time since 2020 that in-person activity felt safe and sustainable. Online communities thrived before the pandemic, and they'll continue to thrive as it passes. But the way that we were building community sort of lived in the void that was left by in-person events. And so now that those are back and our calendars are all super crowded again, I'm going to have to adjust my approach this year to building community online. So what that meant was that 2022 was this kind of transition away from online and into the world, at least for a lot of my students and friends. For me, it was a lot less so. I moved to Toronto very temporarily while my wife finished school, and we were always planning to leave after that happened. So that kind of short-term situation really discouraged me from going out and building relationships more locally. And that led to me being relatively more isolated than I had been in most of the pandemic. And it sucked. I need pretty regular contact with kindred spirits and mentors and friends to expand my perspective and clarify my ideas, or just remind me why this matters. And I fell down on creating that for myself because I'd fallen into a sort of comfortable routine that was then disrupted by the big shift this year back towards in-person activities. And I really felt the pain from that. So if you want, you could pause the video here and think about your own frustrations or setbacks, and then we can go on and think about why that happened. Go ahead, I'll wait. Okay, so those are the problems we have. Now, what can we do about them? First, we have to try to understand what happened. So why did I fall short of doing what I wanted to do this year? And then obviously we want to try and think of a solution if we can. So for me, what was the deal with the low output is the first question. Why did it happen and what can I do? And I think the first thing is structure. Over the last couple of years, I've been trying to figure out how to finish enough meaningful projects in any given unit of time to keep making progress in two worlds that I want to be in, making music and teaching music. I've come to believe that the only alternative to developing a system for doing that is to do way, way less than I'd like to, or to become like a crazy workaholic and probably still do less than I'd like to, like just be stressed out and scattered all the time and just spinning wheels without ever knowing what's really going on. So planning and keeping track of work is the only way to figure out what I can reasonably expect of myself and promise to other people, and reduce unnecessary stress from biting off more than I can chew or thinking that I'm doing nothing when I'm really doing a lot. Gradually, I'm starting to assemble a system that works for me, and the better the system gets, the more I am able to do, or at the very least, the less stressful doing the work actually is. This year, I published a decent little handful of teaching materials, not as much as I'd like to, but I hadn't even been able to approach that task without feeling like I was going insane before. So that's a big sign that things are improving to me, but there's still a long way to go. And I think the biggest problem for me right now is still how I conceive of and organize my projects. I often feel like there's too much to do and too little time, and I think that's a sign that I'm trying to do too much and not giving myself enough time to do it. Shocking, I know. So, what can I do about that? I know I'm starting to get old because thinking about problems like this gets me reminiscing about simpler times. And long, long ago in my early 20s, my life was very, very simple. I woke up, I practiced saxophone and or wrote music. I went to the gym, and then I went to a rehearsal or a jam session or to dinner with my friends. If I was working, I could usually fit 2 of those into the hours outside of work. Something just had to take a hit that day. It was fine. It all balanced out over the course of a month or a season. I was healthy, I was happy, I was thriving in my community, and the life that I was leading felt deeply meaningful to me. And I wasn't spending very much time agonizing about all the things that I couldn't do or wasn't doing. I had figured out what mattered to me, and I was doing it as much as I could every day. My life and interests today aren't the same as they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and I'm a lot more organized than I was then, but it often feels to me now like I'm spinning my wheels. And I do think that I knew something then that I need to rediscover now about identifying what seems to matter and then being at peace with doing that to the temporary exclusion of all the other interesting, worthwhile stuff I could be doing. So focus is the watchword for 2023. Nothing new, but a lot of the most important lessons usually don't come as a revelation anyway. They're just familiar visitors we haven't paid enough attention to recently. There's no silver bullet for problems like this, I've learned. In spite of what internet gurus want you to think, big changes happen because of small changes compounding. Small changes get made through reflection. So I'm just going to start by making sure that for any given project, I can answer 2 questions. Is this the most important thing for you to do right now? And why? On the subject of things you knew but didn't pay enough attention to and now you're paying the price, mental health was also a serious problem for me this year. Last year I got married and moved to Toronto to be with my wife while she finished her degree. And we spent most of this year in Toronto. Then I moved in Montreal to late October to start setting up our new place and checking out our area while she stayed behind for a month to say goodbyes and work and save a little more. So during the first couple of weeks of the move, I was out of all my routines, I was on my own, and I took all pressure off myself to do anything other than apartment setup or teaching my regularly scheduled lessons. So I was taking things really slow, just doing little menial household tasks, building a desk, and spending a lot of time reading and watching movies and hanging out at the cafe down the street. And during that time, I was starting to think about the year and about putting this together. I was thinking about my ups and downs and really a little puzzled by how frustrated and stuck I'd felt for a lot of this year. And then it dawned on me that I'd been depressed for at least 6 months. I'm close with a lot of people who struggle or have struggled with severe depression or anxiety, and I've been blessed to never experience anything like what I've seen them go through. So I think that on some level, I've learned to rate any mental health struggle that isn't clinically severe as normal. But depression comes in different shapes and sizes, and looking back on this year, I realized that I spent a lot of time in a state that wasn't normal or healthy for me. That was a shock because I think it's the first time in my adult life where I felt as bad as I did for as long as I did, and it was a real wake-up call to take better care of myself going forward. I know what that's about for me. It's pretty simple: quiet time alone, daily exercise, quality time with people I love, and making or listening to music for its own sake. And I know that I'm going to focus on those things more next year and try to get enough of them in because I fell down on that this year and really paid a price for it. What do you think you're going to do about practicing next year? Because that's something
I need to put it on my schedule. I need to regularly. It probably has to be early in the morning because the reality is students are, taking all the practice rooms later in the day. So I need to get to Berkeley early to practice on a grand piano. Last semester, I griped all the time about having that early 8 a.m. class, but guess what? I practiced on a real piano quite a bit more.
I got really lucky with something. My friend, his name's Graham, but he's a producer. He goes by Quickly, just insane musician from Portland, and he recently got signed to a label. So he just asked me to go work on his next record. And I was like, dude, yes. So he rented out a huge Airbnb in Joshua Tree. And we went for 2 weeks. And it was August. So it was really hot, super hot. But we had a pool, which was just the best. It was so nice. There was a pool, 4 rooms, nice kitchen. It was just like the best situation possible. And the goal was like to work on his next record, but there was no preconceived ideas or anything. So it was kind of like, let's just have fun. And we did just that. We had fun and came up with like some crazy stuff. We worked on a song from nothing for like 8 hours, but it really felt like 2 or 3 hours, you know? It was kind of like I was in this like state of just like focus, but not in a toxic way, you know? It was like kind of just like the zone. Like I felt like I finally felt what the zone was. Like I was just in there kind of just like blissfully enjoying myself. And it was exactly what I needed to get inspired again. And since then I'm still just like on that. I'm pretty inspired from that still. So that saved me. I think that trip saved me from whatever, you know, darkness I was feeling after releasing a project.
I'm like, well, time to not think about music for the remainder of the day, I guess.
So you actually walk away from it.
I mean, like, with the exception of last night, I've been trying to sleep pretty early, or at least like decently early. And I also run like before I start getting like ready to go to sleep. So usually by like 7 or 8, it's over. It's definitely like part of the process to some degree. I don't think I'll be able to fully like get rid of that as long as I'm like doing this. But I think that like it would definitely help to have more focus going into it. Like instead of saying like I'll go like mess around in Ableton, like I will mess around with one specific feature of Ableton or something along those lines. I'm not sure how I would organize that yet because it's still like really vague.
Basically, the way that I've kind of persevered from that is by caring less and less what other people think and just kind of taking ownership of my own life more and more and taking ownership of my own identity. And there's some frustration, but it's kind of like what like Nietzsche talks about with like the path to becoming the overman or whatever. I'm not saying that I'm that. He does talk about the role of like negativity basically in creating like transcendence or like overcoming. So it did create an obstacle from which I was like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to care what people think of me. I'm just going to do what I want to do.
I went to my best friend from high school's wedding in Dallas. He and his wife are both freelance musicians who are music teachers, and they just bought a beautiful home in the suburbs for like 5-bed, 2-car garage in like a cul-de-sac with like a park, beautiful park. It's just so much more affordable there, right? And they both went to, she's from there, they both went to school there. Like it just made sense for them to live there, right? And what that actually boiled down to for me was like, I live in LA for a very specific reason. I wanted to be around the music industry and a lot of people doing similar things to what I'm interested in, and to like pick up work opportunities from the music industry being based here, as well as find inspiration from other peers doing interesting, exciting things, right? And that does not include financial stability. But like the financial stability is not in that priority list that I just listed, right? I was just in Thailand for like 3 weeks, and I was rich in Thailand. I was staying in nice hotel rooms for $25 a night. I was like paying on average like $1 to $2 to $3 for a nice meal. I could live my life like oh, I want to do this today. Yeah. Oh, I'll just go here. Oh, no, just like so carefree, so incredibly carefree, because I was just like, nothing's gonna bury me, nothing's gonna kill me financially. I'm not gonna like come back from the bar and be like, oh my God, I bought 2 friends 3 rounds of drinks and now I'm broke. Like like that's just not in the cards. But that was just validation of the exact same point, which is like, hey, if that's what you want, just move to Thailand, like, or not even Thailand, move to, Idaho, Oklahoma, whatever. Like, there's so much anxiety that I realize comes from this feeling of, if I am experiencing something that makes me uncomfortable in my world, it's because it's a reality of the world. Whereas the actual reality is it's a factor of the decisions that I've made in my life. And I actually, if I want to change those things, I can make decisions to like alleviate that anxiety. Right. Or I can just remind myself that, oh, I'm experiencing that anxiety for reason A, B, and C, and it's worth it because I'm getting, these other 3 things.
I'm just doing singles because it's like, it's a nice cadence. Like, you just finish track, put it out, do the next one. And then also, like, in terms of like trying to get playlisted and stuff and grow the audience, it is like a better vehicle for that. The one thing with this tour is like, on the one hand, it was like, you don't need to worry about like having an audience. Like, you did this tour and everything. But then it also inserted this like snake in the garden thing in my mind of like, what if you had twice the fan base? What if every night there were like 20 people who knew your music? Like, how much more fun would the gig be? And then it's like, oh, but now, okay, so now I want that, and then now I want more listen. And so that it's like, it actually had the opposite effect of what I was hoping, which is that it made me want more. It kicked off this like hedonic treadmill that I kind of given up on.
Starting a new publication, Clang Magazine, which will be like, I see it as kind of culmination of like my teaching practice expanding beyond one-to-one lessons and Zoom classes being run just exclusively by me, but rather being at kind of the masthead of something that, media is such a broad term, right? But for musicians, and for me more specifically, like sonic artists, people that work in both music and sound studies and audio beyond strictly music, right? There is a way that we can, I think it's important for education to find its way through alternative means beyond just a teacher teaching a student, right? And media is one way to do that. Obviously, we learn so much through various, publications. I see a void when it comes to like other people talking the way that I talk when it comes to music education and sonic arts and sound studies. So I would rather just find people with similar interests and like-minded visions to work with to make a platform beyond myself.
I mean, I'll probably be able to come back to it with fresh ears and be like, okay, this is good enough. and then it'll be done. I don't know. I like mixed this one song like 100 times. And it just didn't work. And I was like, it doesn't work because the arrangement is not good. So I just redid the arrangement, and that just solved all the problems immediately that I was having in the mix. It's like, obviously the elements work together now, so they don't fight with each other, and now it's fine.
E major, F sharp minor, A flat minor, okay, great. So as far as root position goes on the piano, you're relatively comfortable. That was 10 out of 10. You had no real serious problems there. So now we know it's a question of like how it lays on the guitar, because it's obviously when you were doing those, you were counting half steps, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the tricky part, right? Because the guitar, that's a lot different, because you counting half steps across strings is like, so you know it's a major third. You could think of it as like, oh, it's a major third and then a perfect fifth. And then you start practicing seeing those intervals on the guitar. So you're like, oh, well, like a major third, you know, for example, that like you want a major triad on the guitar and you're going to start on the G string and you're good doing this stuff in closed position. This is also like all in one place, but it's just a way to get you started. If you're in closed position and you want a major triad in root position, it's like this, that starts like that. And then it's like this. And so you start to go by shape.
I happen to like kind of where music release is at, even though it's hard and it's frustrating. The one thing I'm a big fan of is the idea that people roll out singles for a year, which I couldn't have expected as a kid, but really kind of just happens to line up with my sensibilities because I want everything to be a movie or a story or a, like I just want everything to have its day. And so I tend to get really excited about the fact that I get to draw things out. It's a little harder when the process of it takes so long, but ultimately it feels really good to roll something out that had a real life, and then you get to take just as long seeing it get to other people. Like you get to really see an entire year go by just the same way you made it, but each song is coming out, every 2 months and has a visual that goes with it or a video. I am personally a fan of that. But I think I'm trying to compartmentalize a little bit and have my experience of making music not reflect that process. Even if I keep releasing stuff in that process and I enjoy that, I think as far as just writing, I'm trying to get into more of a solitary pattern of this is the same as journaling, because that's kind of how it felt when I was 12, 13, 14. It was just like, oh, I'm happy to be alone in my room in the middle of the night, and like this is just like I have to explore this thing that happened today, or I have to explore like how I feel about this like issue that keeps coming back to my mind, and I want to play guitar and I'm going to do it at the same time, and then like, just have that be more consistent, because I haven't been treating it that way as much. I think maybe doing Lucky Duck and feeling how meditative that was has flipped a mirror back on my own, like, more isolated practice and like how that can still feel that way.
We've talked about the ups, we've talked about the downs. What about the flats?
Okay, two different types of plateaus. One is where you're working on something and you don't think it's getting better. And the other type of plateau is something that you've taken your hands off of. I would say everything in my life in the last year as I've been doing it has felt like a plateau. I've very rarely had moments of like, wow, that was a breakthrough. It's usually way later that I can see what the breakthrough was. And that's sometimes disappointing because you want to have that feeling of arrival. But even with the record, like for where it is now, I guess it's a breakthrough from where I was a year ago, but it just felt like so much slogging, that I listen to it now and I'm like, okay, cool. But I'm also like, this is nothing new for me. Like I've been living with this for so long and it doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It just feels like more of the same. I mean, I've been practicing the guitar a lot in the last year and I think it actually has developed, but on a day-by-day basis, especially if I'm practicing for too long when I'm really tired, at the end of it, I can just be like, oh my God, this isn't going anywhere. Like I'm not getting any better. And what I've started to realize is that like, it's like if I played, like if I'm doing metronome work and I was able to like divide, bar of whole note equals 25 into 16th notes, like one time a little bit better than yesterday, that's actually what will compound. Often when you feel like you're plateauing, you're actually doing what I've started to call to my students like thicket work, where like when you're working on stuff, sometimes you feel like you're just like in this really dense like underbrush and you're not getting anywhere and it's like exhausting and you have this like machete and you're just like hacking away at like low-lying branches that are smacking you in the face or whatever. I just try to say to myself, this is thicket work, and it will feel like nothing's happening for a while, and then I'll look back and I'll see that something was happening. Pretty much everything in my life has felt like a plateau for the last year in that way. And it's only in hindsight, really. Even with the things that felt like moments of arrival, there was so much work going into them that when it actually happened, it wasn't like, hooray, it was like, okay, like what, okay, great, what's happening tomorrow? Like this, thank God that I got through that, you know?
I haven't really seen anyone discuss plateaus much online. The only musician I can ever recall hearing talk about them directly is Michael Brecker in this interview that he gave about practice that I think I watched in like 2010.
Sometimes there are periods when I'm doing it better than others. There's sometimes where it's just maintenance practicing, where I'm just doing the least I have to do just to keep everything well oiled. And then there's periods of true growth.
I think it's worth talking about because the fact of the matter is that most of the time, in most ways, we are not going up or down. We're just coasting. Plateaus are often thought of as walls, like they're things that we need to avoid or break as quickly as possible because we always have to be making progress as musicians. But you could also think of them as safety nets or rewards for hard work. Thank God we don't just immediately backslide on any musical skill that we stop attending to for a day or a week or even a month. Imagine a world where no matter how much progress you make as a musician, your skills rapidly degrade toward nothingness the minute you stop practicing. Developing and maintaining a large repertoire would be impossible. Taking a long vacation or a sabbatical would be out of the question. Get injured and you have to take a year off to rehab? Okay, well, say goodbye to all of your chops. But luckily for us, it doesn't really work that way. Experienced musicians know that once you really learn something, it can stay in your ear, your brain, and your body for months or years. It might not necessarily improve, but it will remain the same. Your progress on that technique or piece or concept will plateau. Even if it does degrade due to months or years of disuse, anyone who's ever learned anything well can tell you that once you've got it deeply, your process of relearning it later is often far easier and faster than your initial struggle to internalize it was. This happens to different degrees depending on your music and the skills you use to make it, but by and large, once you invest enough energy, skills and knowledge are pretty durable, and that's especially true with music. When you look at it this way, plateaus aren't obstacles most of the time. They're more like rewards for all the work that we put in.
Calling a plateau a realization was like helpful for me. I don't know. It's so much more exciting to like be in this state of like rapid improvement or like manic working, but like I'm starting to see my process is pretty cyclical. My input and output cycles are like they work in rotation with each other, where at a certain point I'm just like I'm obsessed with this audiobook, or like I can't put this album down, or like I've watched 40 episodes of this TV show and I hope it never ends. But I consider that to be like input, like this is like all things that I'm like taking in that are going to affect my outlook and how I make things, right? I think of that in the same way as like improving my skills, where it's like I'm going to try a bunch of exercises, or I'm going to like practice the trumpet a bunch in this one period of time. But in the time where I'm actually like outputting the most, I'm probably not improving all that much. I'm probably just like inspired by the things that all of a sudden make sense in my head, right? All of a sudden, like I have like a vision of that world, the world that I'm trying to make, like, because like these three skills just came together that I've been working on, and all of a sudden I can access this sound that I haven't been able to. So I make like 4 things using that one sound.
You've reviewed a song a dozen times this week and you're nailing it every time you play it now? Great! You can go spend a week learning a new one, and when you come back to review this one, you might find it no different than how you left it. It's at least as good as it was. You've been grinding away on guitar technique for 2 months? Great! You could spend a month or 2 just learning songs, and when you come back to your technical practice, a lot of what you were working on will still be under your hands. Tuning up might be needed, but if you're finding yourself having to relearn something from scratch, it means you took way too much time off, or more likely didn't learn it properly in the first place. There's a reason we talk about dusting off a piece of music or a practice routine that we've spent a lot of time with in the past. If learning it the first time was like building a chair, reviewing it later is like taking the chair out of the corner and dusting it off so you can sit on it without getting your clothes dirty. It's a lot less effort, is the point. So reaching a plateau can be a real relief. You can't make progress on everything all the time, all at once. You are probably working on a couple things right now that you're interested in and neglecting other aspects of your musical life. And thankfully, you're not falling apart in those areas. You're just plateauing. So you're not getting much better, but you're not getting much worse. Enjoy that. Who wants to climb a mountain that's all steep uphill the whole way anyway? Since I spent all this time harping about how most plateaus are healthy and normal, here's two that I've noticed this year that I'm fine with resting on for a while. One, general guitar technique. My experience with a saxophone taught me that it's a ridiculous notion to always be focused on improving your general technique. There are plenty of other ways to meaningfully improve as a musician. Technique matters, but it's too easy to create an endless amount of challenging busy work for yourself and avoid doing the work that actually matters to you. Right now, I care about writing and learning songs. If I have 20 minutes or 30 minutes, or even sometimes an hour to work on music in a day, that's probably all I'm going to do. And at some point, I'll probably find myself exploring specific exercises to expand or refine my technique or solve certain problems in the writing process. But at the moment, I mostly get what I need from writing and learning repertoire. And aside from the psychological benefits, there's nothing sacred or special about dedicating a substantial chunk of your time solely to pure technique practice. It's just one approach to the problem of progressing as a musician and an artist. The other comfortable plateau that I have right now that I don't think I'm going to do much about for a while is production chops. Given how much time I've spent and plan to spend writing with my instruments, and my feeling that the music I'm trying to make right now is mainly about composition, pressuring myself to make beats or learn new tricks for making music in the box just doesn't really make any sense. I suspect at some point I'll have a deep electronic phase, but I've dabbled enough to get the flavor, and for now, it's all about melodies for me. Investing too much energy into learning more about Ableton than I already know would take my focus off of what really matters to me right now, so it'll probably gather dust on my hard drive for a season or two.
The thing I said about like how I only have so much time to devote to the instruments that I play, like that amount of time that I have for them is only gonna become like smaller as time goes on. So I'm like pretty much just learning to be like okay if I'm not like great at all of them, because like that's not really possible. Before coming out here, I was just like, yeah, I want to be able to be like do everything myself, but it's like I don't really have to. So if like I should try and focus on things that like I really need to get better at.
I've been seeking musical work because I don't want to work in the service industry anymore. But every time I think about what I could possibly do and try to realistically follow what that would actually look like, I get to a point of either having to admit to myself that I would either try to get session work, and then I would have to be really responsible about like networking in a different way and putting myself out there as a singer and maybe creating like a really insufferable TikTok, Instagram presence that I don't want. And like every single version of what I think I could do to get out of the service industry, just so I can make money to continue making my music, I come to the realization that it would be really depressing. And so the place where I'm happy to have plateaued is I'm actually just okay working at a hookah lounge. and paying for music that way. Or someday maybe, you know, it won't be the hookah lounge and maybe it'll be a restaurant or who knows. But just like if it's a place that I enjoy the people at, if I think about the actual things that matter, not I have a day job and I hate working in the service industry, if there are people there that I care about, if the place itself has a really nice energy, I'd prefer to be in something like that than on paper, I make money as a musician, but like what's really happening is something that like soulfully feels really terrible.
With artists specifically, we can't think about this as it's not some rational quantifiable equation situation of like X labor plus effort equals success, blah blah blah, all these things, right? You know, it's just as much nepotism and just as much happenstance as it is actual like skill and effort that you put into it, right? So to plateau, I see as an artist, if is not even necessarily a negative, but rather like steady. I don't know if I'd be emotionally fulfilled with that touring intensive lifestyle followed by like kind of just juggling around with figuring out what to do with my time. If you're doing what you love and you're paying bills and you're surviving and you have enough afterwards to like live happily, quote unquote, you know what I mean, and not starve, I think that it's okay to have those moments where like I'm not having these peaks like I expected, right? I think it's okay to have some, you know, it's stability, you know, being flat. Downward is a different story.
Sometimes we've been in one place long enough and it's time to make forward progress. On the teaching side, I feel like I've hit a flat line in terms of studying pedagogy, and it's time to start pushing myself there again. There are a couple books I didn't get to this year that I mentioned that I want to read, which will probably lead to a much longer reading list as I follow references. And I also really want to write and share more about what I'm learning and what my students are doing. It really helps me condense the things that we're learning and hopefully make them useful to my future students and my future self. On the artistic side, my repertoire didn't expand very much this year, so I'm toying with the idea of a cover project, and I'm also just trying not to write such devilish guitar parts this year or hire my friends to torture me by writing those kinds of parts for me. That way I can write original music more quickly and get it into performance or recording shape without having to double or triple the amount of time that I'm spending practicing, which wouldn't be sustainable or realistic at all.
I just took a lesson for the first time since college, actually, like last week. It was so awesome. I loved it. And it was because it was nice because I thought a really long time about what teacher I wanted to study with. And I chose this great guy, Mark Dresser. I don't know if you know him, but he's absolutely incredible. And it was like, I don't know. It was all like I was seeing a plateau in the future. I've actually been feeling great about my practicing recently, and I've been getting like a lot better, I think. But I was like, you know, I don't know what I don't know about my playing. So I was like, I actually, luckily this year I haven't really felt many plateaus. It's been kind of nicely upward, but I almost was like trying to get ahead of a plateau I saw coming in the future, where it was like, oh, I'm spending all this time practicing. I have been practicing more like 2-3 hours a day, which is, for me, feels pretty good actually, because I write also a lot. So I'm not talking like 6 hours a day or anything, but spending all this time practicing and getting good. And I think I have a lot of interesting like harmonic and rhythmic ideas, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to go to a teacher who's an expert on timbre. Like, you know, I think as a jazz bass player, like we don't think about, maybe this is wrong for me, but I think as a whole, like timbre is not something we think about as much. And we think about having a great sound and using it in different ways. But like this guy I went to study with is like a real expert on like extended techniques and like other things that you can do with the bass that I don't really think about in a normal jazz gig. So I guess that was, just trying to get out ahead of it.
One of like the biggest moments of self-reflection this year that was hard but ultimately really helpful was a conversation in which me and the other person had been realizing that we had given up on music already, and that our behavior in like the past 5 years had kind of shown that. And we were trying to figure out why that was. What is it that was keeping us like in a place where we were not treating it like the main thing in our lives? Would not that it even has to be. I don't even necessarily believe that it has to be, but if you want it to, then, and you're not, then maybe it's something you look at. And this topic came up about how songwriting feels like it's plateaued. Like the specific songwriting that is like the singer-songwriter. If you're talking about older folk music, that's very different. But if we're talking about like the frontman, singer-songwriter person, that is sort of a 20th century phenomenon. And sharing like your deepest, innermost personal experiences, and you wrote everything. And he was saying that it feels like it's been perfected already. It feels like that little tiny corner of what music has become an obsession for people. And there are so many other ways to get that experience, not just in that one corner, but it's been done so well already that it's almost like, why try to do that? I think that every single individual is very different, and the way that they play an instrument / write how they feel / perform it is so unique that like I don't think it's I think it's a bottomless type of thing. I don't think it just comes to an end because everybody's done it already. But I do think there is something to be said for having that highly specific idea of what a songwriter is, and not letting yourself determine that that is what you do if you also have a great time approaching writing your songs in different mediums, doing something that's just instrumental. I still am writing it, but I'm not just like staying the singer-songwriter person, writing lyrics and then playing around in Ableton and not using a guitar, and like using like found sounds and like MIDI synths, and like it I mean, it seems like an obvious thing. Like I never wanted to even just be a singer-songwriter as it is, but it does seem like if you're interested in being a solo artist, that is kind of what people consider you. I don't want to stay there. I want to now, break through that mold.
Like before I put out like the record and stuff, with like definitely with like drumming, I felt definitely I felt plateaued. And it was kind of like I don't know if I really cared, to be honest. I think I was like fine with it. I got to a point where it's like, okay, I want to learn some new stuff again. And I think it was like a good amount of time. Maybe it was like a 3-month period where I just like didn't play drums outside of like gigs or something. And then I don't know, I just got like a bug to kind of just like jump back into it. And I didn't really know what to practice. So I just like got books. Like I just got like drum books, and kind of realized how amazing some of them are. Like I really, there's like I'm working out this book right now actually. It's called The New Breed, and it's literally based on like, there's like stuff we've talked about like limitations and whatever, playing and stuff. So it's like one of those books, and it's literally opened my mind up so much, and in a way I never thought it could. I have another book that's literally called Patterns by this drummer Gary Chafee, and it's just about patterns, like rhythmic patterns, that I've found to be super useful. And once you learn things like this, it's not like you learn them and then you're doing them all the time. It's like you'll be playing, soloing, or whatever, and it'll kind of just come out. And I definitely have been appreciating that kind of feeling of like new discovery again. I've also never really worked out of books before, so it was just like something completely new for me.
Skill plateaus can be an opportunity to switch our focus or just to enjoy some of the rewards of our hard work. They're a normal and healthy part of the learning process. We shouldn't strive to break them on reaction or avoid them altogether. We just need to be aware of where we're plateauing and how we're thinking and feeling about it and why. It's okay to be okay with the plateau, but knowing which ones you're okay with resting on and which ones you want to break actually ends up leading us to my last big question.
It's just kind of like a fun thing to do in my free time and something that I'm pretty interested in.
That's a really good reason. Those are really good reasons to do it.
I've always felt that it is a higher calling to help people with the work that you do. And both of my parents do that and have done that for their careers. And they're like in different modes of healthcare. And I've always seen art as a similar thing. I've always considered art to be extremely necessary for the emotional well-being of people, and so I think it is a service job, and I think it is the best way that I can help a large or small number of people.
I don't know. It's like an exploration, like with the electronic music stuff. It's just kind of like exploring new possibilities, and I feel like that's just like good for my brain or something. It's like kind of a form of entertainment, but also like I'm like really compelled to do it for some reason. I think definitely making music for me has been pretty much completely selfish. There's a bit of like, maybe I have something to prove when I'm like trying to like make really cool songs or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is. It's just like I want to prove that I can like make something, like make a world in a song, like and I can like do all of it myself. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. It's not a particular, it's kind of an ugly truth, I guess. I don't know. It's not like very glamorous.
Honestly, I don't have anything else to do. Yeah, no, I'm like, I wake up, I eat breakfast, I go to the gym, I come back, if I have time, I eat lunch, I go to work, and it's like, I come back and I'm just like, well, I mean, the whole reason I'm out here is to be making music. I'm not gonna, it's like, do I just sit on my ass, play video games instead? And then my friend was like, he's really into Valorant right now. So he's like, yeah, you should get into it and we'll play together. And then I played, and then I had 3 4v5s in a row, and then I stopped. And then I'm like, all right, I guess it's just back to music. Yeah, I don't really have time for anything else, but I also don't really have like really care to do much else right now.
I mean, dude, honestly, like, I just can't stop like thinking about it. I literally wake up every morning with like some sort of idea in my head, and I don't know, it's just an obsession that's just been like a part of my life. I just can't stop. I don't know what it is, honestly. I just love.
I think this is one of those things that's just true, and people say it so much it becomes cliche. But especially with my writing, I really think it's the only way I can actually express like the abstract weirdness I feel inside of me, like for real. Like it's my way of actually getting that across, and I'm really grateful for that. It's awesome. I think that's it. Really at the end of the day, I really think it's has to do with just it's who I am, and it's how I actually get across like what's going on for me.
Yeah. I'm an avid storyteller, and I like talking about my life because it's interesting to me. I see my own life through pretty over dramatic goggles, which makes, from my point of view, things pretty fun because I seek drama. I like drama. So when there is something, even as mediocre as it might be, like just that occurs in my life, I gotta, not only do I have to be able to see it in a way that's not mediocre, but I have to be able to share it. And a lot of that has to, like, love stories and all that. So even if they're just like really bland and like nothing actually happens, but I can, even if it's a situation like that, then I can end up drawing it out into an epic story of crazy proportions that takes 3 hours to tell. But after a while, it gets kind of tiring to do all that talking. So when I'm able to sit down at a piano, and play cool, neat chords while telling that same story in a rhyming fashion, it tends to be pretty satisfying.
I've always made music as a way to understand my place in the world. And before I made music, I wrote fiction when I was in middle school. And I wanted to be a writer, and then it became songwriting, and then it became playing guitar and improvising and writing songs, and I never saw those things as being opposed. It just comes back to listening to oneself and trying to figure out how to engage with all the music that, that at least for me, that I care about. For me, it's always been a very personal thing. It's never really been about fitting into a certain scene or a certain community. It's been about like understanding my place in the world and like expressing it or expressing something about my own experience, and that just doesn't seem to be opposed to sharing it.
Yeah, it's a division of two things. I mean, but the one at the top is my love for it. I've been doing it for almost 20 years now, so it's not, yeah, it's just it's one of the things I've known so well. It's just playing guitar and my development with it, and starting off with like classic rock and playing instrumental rock, and then learning about jazz, and then going to school for music, and then coming back to Toronto and turning into a professional musician. And then you realize, we live in a society, but you got to make money. So that's what I do to survive as well. And it took a while, I couldn't pay my rent just with music out of school. It took about 6 years. I do it because I love it, and I do it because there are bills to be paid. But I think I'm going to hit a point where I'll be just doing the things I love, and I don't have to worry so much about the other part. I think that'll come with time, where I can just maybe just put out solo guitar records and live in Rome or something, live in France.
I can't
live
wait.
off my royalties and drink espresso, and just
on a day-to-day basis. Once I'm in the music, once I'm in the studio, like working on tracks, like it's just, I don't really worry about other stuff in my life, like while I'm doing that, or while I'm listening back, while I'm just in that like sector of my life. So then my new thing is like, well then not my new thing, but like a realization I'm coming back to is like, yeah, like maybe I should just really just be doing this like literally as much as possible. Once it becomes a like, oh, I want to get more people listening or anything like that, then it's like work. But the more I'm doing this, the kind of more happy with my life I am. So it's like, it's just like that's like the day-to-day thing now for me with it. I always felt like I just could never stop doing that. Like I don't know, I just never would have. I know people who went to music school and like they just don't make music anymore. They don't play anymore, like nothing. And it's like for me, I don't know. I think this idea was ingrained in my head so long ago that like I'm a musician. So it's like this is just what I'm. Yeah, like this is just what I'm doing. So what I'm always going to be doing. I think about like when I'm 80 or 90 or something. Like at what point? Like, is there a point where I would stop making music and then just kind of hang out and like be like a retired like person and just kind of like do whatever? But like, I used to kind of think maybe, but now I feel like I'm definitely like as long as I like can physically do it, I probably will still be doing it. But it's really funny to think about what my music would be like when I'm 80 years old.
Well, first, I think I should open that with, since we've come this far, admitting that I have written one song this entire year. And at first, I was so terrified, and I kept trying to do this song a day for a month. See, the uniqueness of your living situation and like how it changes affects how you approach making music a lot. This is just the first time that I've had my own bedroom, which is maybe why I wrote the one song now. I moved in September, but it's like been years since I had my own bedroom. It's insane. Like I forgot what that was like, and I was so excited, and I like painted it and I decorated it, and I have all this studio gear that I bought when I quit Guitar Center. I really was looking out for my future self, and I was like, oh, I have a little home studio. I have so many instruments. I have so many instruments now. I have like the most beautiful acoustic guitar. I've got like 4 electrics. I've got like a balalaika, a banjo, a violin, a harmonium, a mandolin, but like I am sitting in that room completely like preoccupied with the fact that I'm the only person in that room right now. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is insane. So like just coming to terms with like that, the fact that I have not had a healthy relationship with like one of the most important things in the universe, solitude, is like probably what I need to focus on now. I really need to enjoy my solitude because I forgot how to. The original reason that I did this to begin with didn't exist for like a few years, and I was just going. And now I'm like, oh yeah, no, this being alone in your room business is like the most important experience you have.
I have a story, but the bottom line is, I don't know. Something compelled me to go to the piano when I was 4 years old and start figuring things out. And now I've been doing it my whole life, and I find it very difficult to stop. But sometimes I can't stop and it's fun, and sometimes I can't stop and it's torture. And over time, I've accumulated some experiences that help me keep going when it's torture. And one of those things actually happened totally by surprise a couple weeks ago. I was sitting at a slightly out of tune upright piano at this cafe in a town I just moved to where I know almost nobody. And I was searching for something to play. And I thought of playing True Love Waits, which I haven't practiced in years. And it just fell right out of my fingers, took over my voice, no trouble. That's one of the little miracles that you just learn to accept as totally normal as a musician. You just learn something and then it's in here and in here and here forever, it seems like, or for a long time. But I was playing and it was going fine. And when I play, even in public, it's usually not for anybody else. I'm fine with other people being there. I hope I'm not bothering them, but I play for myself. When I reached the chorus, though, I heard one of the people finishing her shift singing along very, very beautifully. And the room has 2 floors, so the piano's upstairs and the counter is downstairs, and I couldn't see her at all. I could just hear her. So I was just listening to this disembodied voice, but that was as much connection as I'd felt with anybody through eye contact or a conversation or any of the other ways we usually try to see and feel seen since I got here. And it reminded me of the feeling of listening to a song that you love and feeling like somebody is singing across time and space directly to you, and you can't see them or touch them, so they're unreal in a certain sense, but also more real because they're part of something bigger than an individual human being. And that just always had this way, when it happened to me, of making me feel like the world was a good and a beautiful place, and like I had a place in it, that I belonged. So I finished the song and went back to my table, and someone had left a dessert there on a plate. And for a moment, I just felt totally at home in this new and very unfamiliar place. So it's amazing how little it can take. Not a hug, not even a greeting, just a couple lines sung together and a little gift. And that's something about music that I really appreciate, that makes me glad for all the time that I spend with it. When you understand music and when the music understands you, you can feel this sense that you aren't alone, even if you're just playing for an empty room. And when the music moves through you and bounces off someone else who understands, and then comes back as another voice singing in tune with yours or as a surprise dessert, you can feel certain that you're not alone, at least for a moment. I've played for the empty room for no one but me since I was 4 years old. And I've never needed an audience. Until I was in my 20s, I resented the audience. I hated playing for people. But I've learned how it feels to play for someone and have it mean something, to have it resonate. By nature, those kinds of moments are fewer and farther between than the daily moments of connection we experience when we're practicing or writing or listening to music. But that's why they're so special. They're gifts. You can't predict them, you can't guarantee them, you just work on your craft and then show what you're doing to somebody, and if it hits, it hits. And because of that, those little moments are so thrilling, especially when you don't go looking for them. And they teach me something really important about music that I don't think there's any other way to learn. So, like I said, I don't really know why I make music. I just do, and I feel sort of compelled to keep coming back to instruments. I've tried to stop, and it never takes. But when it brings things like that into my life, how could I ever get tired of it?
There would be nothing, not nothing else for me, but there would definitely be a lot less waking me up in the morning, to be honest. I think that there's magic. There's magic there. We are wizards as musicians. At the end of the day, so much of this is irrational, right? What we do is irrational, especially now in today's economy. Like, why are we doing this? And it's because there is literal magic, that there's like the natural high you get hearing XYZ of your favorite type of music or playing it. It's literally Star Wars. It's literally like the dark side and the Jedis. You know what I mean? Like there's just the force is there. Can you figure it out or not? And can you make it your life, whether or not you're selling records for a living, teaching for a living, promoting somebody else's work as your business, running a venue? That's all magic industry. To me, I see that as just, we're in the business of like giving you that goof juice that you can't describe.
When I was a young jazz nerd, talking about stuff like this was just something that we did. Whenever we weren't playing music, we would be talking about how to play it and evaluating each other's performances, or talking about why we played it. We'd sit around and tell each other what we thought each person was doing well, what made them unique in our peer group, or what kind of potential we saw. We'd talk about what we needed to work on or what we were personally struggling with. And we'd share what we were learning from our teachers and give each other lessons, trying to help each other overcome current challenges or find new things to chew on that would just keep us expanding and growing as musicians. And we'd talk about what all that meant to us. That was a pretty much daily thing the entire time I was in school and in the years following. And we enjoyed it. It felt good. Even when we were hearing critical feedback, it was coming from people who we trusted and who we knew were trying to help us become better artists. I realized when I started teaching that this is not the norm. At first, when I tried to talk about this stuff with students, I found that a lot of them would blank or sort of shut down, and only a handful could talk with any depth or at any length about their progress, their challenges, and their philosophy or attitude towards music, such as it was. So it became important to me to give them as many opportunities as I could to think about this stuff and not to leave these conversations to chance. If you've been watching this, I hope it helped you think about your music making in a deeper or different way, and I hope you find something worth celebrating about your year in music. That's all for now. I'll see you next year.